Hey, yo everyone, Andrew here, bringing you another video. And today we're going to be doing another edition of How to Get Into. Now, for those of you new to my channel and know nothing about what this video series is, basically what I do is I help you figure out on how to get into certain video game series. See, the reason why I did this video series is because, well, a lot of people are asking, Andrew, how do I get into Zelda? Or Andrew, how do I get into Mario or Pokemon or Trauma Center or various different other video game series? So I figured instead of just typing up a response and sending it to you guys, that I would actually make a video for it. The rules of these videos are pretty simple. I have to show you how to get into a video game series in 5 games. Plain, flat, and simple. No more, no less. Because see, the thing is I don't want to overwhelm people with all these various different games from a video game series and feel as though there's just too much for you to actually play to get into the video game series. But at the same time, you want the right amount of games so that you don't feel as though you're getting cheated out of the experience. In addition to that, there has to be a rhyme or reason with the games that I'm giving you. There has to be maybe an evolution of gameplay or story or, I don't know, something. But there has to be a rhyme or reason with the games I give you. They really need to show you how to get into this video game series. Now, we did Trauma Center last time, and before that, we did The Legend of Zelda. So if you would like to know how to get into those video game series, you can just check back on my channel. But today, we are going to talk about on how to get into Resident Evil. Now, Resident Evil is a survival horror game series which is basically dealing with zombies. I mean, if you want to call them zombies, this is zombies, but they're not your zombies that are magically brought back to life. Rather, they're zombies that are created by a virus. And the thing about Resident Evil is it's had so many different gameplays and evolutions through the years. From its clunky tank-like survival horror features back in the day with Resident Evil 1 through 3 and Code Veronica, to its third-person survival horror action style with Resident Evil 4 and 5, to its rail shooting capabilities with Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles. It's had so many different gameplays and evolutions throughout the years. And Resident Evil is known for having a huge storyline. It's almost intimidating getting into Resident Evil because, see, taking Zelda for example, Zelda may have a lot of history and story there, but really you can nitpick at any of the games, take it out, and play that game, and only need to know about that game. Despite all the history that is behind, say, Twilight Princess, the games that come before and come after, or even Wind Waker, that is really a sequel of sorts, a spiritual sequel to other games, you don't have to play those games to understand the story. With Resident Evil, you kind of have to sometimes. It really is a difficult story to get into, but a rewarding one when you do. It's actually one of the most endearing and fun and enjoyable video game stories out there, despite how kooky it can get at times, because it can get kooky at times. So, how do we get into Resident Evil? Well, the approach to that I'm taking is really coming from two angles. One is story. What's the best way to introduce you to the Resident Evil series? What's the best way to start off? What's a good jumping on point story-wise so that you understand what's going on, but at the same time don't feel confused? And second of all is gameplay wise. See, like I said, Resident Evil is well known for having various different gameplay styles. Some of them is comfortable and inviting for new players, and some of them are downright scary when playing it. So I will show you how to get into Resident Evil, not only story, but also with gameplay. So with that said, let's get into how to get into Resident Evil. Now, I'm going to do the best I can to describe the games, why I picked these games in the order that I did, and exactly what they contribute to the Resident Evil series. Starting off, the great thing about this, how to get into, is Resident Evil is coming out with the Resident Evil 6. So if you're interested in Resident Evil 6 and you have an inkling that you want to play it, and you're like, wow, this game looks interesting, then these are the games that you should pick up beforehand to understand and to enjoy Resident Evil 6. The first game on my list of how to get into would be Resident Evil 4, which actually has various editions. There's the PlayStation 2, the GameCube, and the Nintendo Wii version, which I have the Wii and the GameCube version here. Now, with this, I'm going to give you, which version you should pick up because it really comes down to one of two kinds of players. Resident Evil 4 is a great jumping on point for new players, and it was actually my jumping on point, so I can be a little biased when it comes down to this, but a lot of people generally agree that Resident Evil 4 is probably one of the best places to jump onto. One is that although it is connected to the Resident Evil series and there is a lot of recurring themes and characters, you don't need to know anything about Resident Evil going into this. You don't need to know about Umbrella. You don't need to know about Ada Wong, and you don't need to know about the protagonist, Leon. Everything about those characters and that stuff, the plot elements and story elements, gets talked about in here, and it doesn't go into huge detail where you feel left out. When I played this game and I went through it, I didn't know anything about Leon, at least the first time I played it. But I got to learn about the character. I knew that he was part of a big tragedy that happened beforehand with the Umbrella Corporation, and that now he's a secret agent. Plain, flat, and simple. You don't need to know anything about Resident Evil story-wise to go into this game. It is relatively a great jumping on point for Resident Evil fans. It's a self-contained story in the Resident Evil universe, and it's actually the most disconnected story from the Resident Evil universe. None of the main viruses are used in here. None of the main villains are really used in here, like Wesker or Umbrella. It's its own story, but at the same time, it is connected to the Resident Evil universe. So, Resident Evil 4 story-wise is one of the best places to jump on. Now, I have the GameCube and the Wii edition. I'll try the best I can to talk about the PS2 edition because the PS2 edition does have a lot of things that the GameCube doesn't. The GameCube edition was the first edition to come out. Now, if you want to get this version, it's actually not a bad idea because I think it will be the most challenging of the versions, along with the PS3 version. And I know they released on the Xbox Live Network. The reason why this version will be more challenging is just the controls, and when you play it with the Wii, it's a little bit easier because targeting is a little bit easier. But you get a little bit more of a challenge with Resident Evil 4 on the GameCube. When you play it on the Wii, it's a bit easier, which for some people that could be attractive because Resident Evil 4 can be a difficult game at times. But it's a bit easier to play it on the Wii because with the Wii pointer, you can get headshots like crazy. It is ridiculous how good I can turn a shotgun into a sniper rifle. So the Wii version is a tad bit easier, but it has more content. All the previous versions from the PS to the GameCube, all the extra content is put in here in addition with other stuff that was not in the previous versions. This is probably the most complete version, and I do recommend this as the one that you should pick up. However, if you want a bit more of a challenge, mostly due to how the controls work, the GameCube version is another good place to go. So good place to jump on with Resident Evil would be the Resident Evil 4 Wii and GameCube edition, although you can get the Xbox Live or the DLC, whatever they're doing right now, or the PS2 version. Any version's good. Next would be the Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles series. Now, Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, and I might as well pull this out too, the Resident Evil Dark Side Chronicles. These are going to be picks 2 and 3. 3, 2. The thing that these games are basically they're rail shooters. You don't have control over the movement of your character. You just point and shoot. That's a rail shooter. You may know them like I don't know, was it Time Crisis that you play before you go to a movie theater in the arcade? Is a game like that. It's a rail shooter. You point, you shoot. Plain, flat, and simple. But the thing that makes these games definitely games that I recommend is they're basically Resident Evil 1 through Code Veronica, every Resident Evil game up to Resident Evil 4. It allows you to experience the story of Resident Evil without having to get the, 4, 5 plus games. Basically, these are the games that are included, story-wise. And you get pretty much the full story. You get Resident Evil 1. Well, Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil Code Veronica. And you also get the Wesker Unknown story and the Leon Krauser story. So you get two completely original stories to go along with these. Um, And really, the great thing about these is Resident Evil with Resident Evil 1, 2, 3 is you usually play as two characters. Let's just take Resident Evil 1, for example. You play as Chris or Jill. The problem is when you play as Chris, Jill completely disappears. Where does she go? We don't know. And the same thing with Chris. You play as Jill. Where does Chris go? Did he go to the bathroom? Is he going to the bathroom right now? He shouldn't have gone to Chipotle's before we did the zombie invasion. And you don't know exactly what went on with the other characters. In the GameCube version, they tried to explain it, but the great thing about these games is you're always with your partner. It basically takes all the plot holes that were in the previous games and fills them. And it makes it a little less convoluted and a lot more streamlined. It's still very much the Resident Evil stories. It's just a few tweaks here and there to the story that makes it make more sense. Like, for example, Jill and Chris were always with each other in the mansion. Leon and Claire, with the exception of 1 or 2 points, they were pretty much with each other the whole entire time in Raccoon City rather than separated. It's small things like that that really do make these games inviting story-wise to the player. In addition to that, like I said, you get pretty much all the Resident Evil information you need about the actual Resident Evil universe, the major characters, the major stories, the major plot elements in these two games. Instead of having to go out and venture out and find Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, 3, Code Veronica, 0, these games have everything there for you already. Gameplay wise, these games are just fun games. Rail shooters are really, it can be a hit and miss sometimes. It can be either incredibly easy or incredibly hard. Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles is a fairly easy game. There's a few tough boss battles, especially in the Wesker sections, but it's a fairly good game and it has a bit of a challenge to it, but it's the easier of the two. Darkside Chronicles improves everything that was maybe lacking in the original Umbrella Chronicles. Zombies are smart. The difficulty is how good you are. If you're an incredibly good player and getting headshots off left and right, the zombies will start to move and dodge the second you go near the head. The AI in this is actually pretty good and they're really intelligent. So the great thing is if you're a good player, they become very difficult enemies. If you're a sucky player, then the game has an easier feel to it. Again, these two games are really helpful for getting the Resident Evil story. Now, you can go out and get Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, 4, Code Veronica 0. That's fine. But you can basically get those 5 games in 2, plus extra content. Definitely must gets. Now, you played through Resident Evil 4. You played through basically Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, Code Veronica, and 0, as well as various other stories with the Chronicle series. Next, you should get Resident Evil 5. Now, Resident Evil 5 is not my favorite game in the series, but it definitely has its pros to it. While it does lose that survival horror aspect a bit in this, and there is something that happens at the end that I greatly disagree with. We do have a lot of good things that come out of this. One is the gameplay is tweaked just a bit that things feel a little bit more streamlined. You get a partner in this, so you can play a co-op, which is good. And you get the introduction of some great cutscenes, some great graphics, and the characters are great in this. Maybe not so Chris on here, but Sheva right here is one of the best new additions to the Resident Evil family, and Wesker is just amazing in this. The downsides to Resident Evil 5 is it's a relatively easy game. And I really do mean it's a relatively easy game, at least in comparison to Resident Evil 4. In addition to that, there's a few game things like how your inventory works that I feel as though was mishandled, and there's some plot stuff at the end which I won't get into that I disliked. But on the whole, Resident Evil 5 was a decent game. If it wasn't called Resident Evil, I think it would be more well received because it does lose that survival horror aspect, but it's still a good Resident Evil game. Nowhere as good as 4. Right now, 4 I think is the best of the Resident Evils, with 2 coming in second place. Or the Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles series. So you basically, right now, in 4 games, played through everything in Resident Evil. Story-wise, right here, you have Resident Evil 0, 1, 2, 3, Code Veronica, 4, 5, and 2 additional stories. That is 9 stories for Resident Evil, and you basically got everything you need to know about Resident Evil here. But you're probably saying, well, geez, Andrew, those are only, whoa, they are 5 games. Those are 5 games that you can pay. No, they are 4 games. I almost got screwed up. You say, Andrew, those are 4 games for Resident Evil. You're supposed to give us 5, and that's true. See, I got a little confused because I did show you 2 versions of Resident Evil 4. But the 5th game that I recommend that you guys pick up is the Resident Evil remake for the Nintendo GameCube, or it was actually released on Nintendo Wii also. Basically, the Resident Evil remake is a graphically updated version of the original Resident Evil game. Now, the reason why I'm giving you this is because Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, and Code Veronica, along with 0, have, well, clunky tank-like controls. That really are kind of hard controls to deal with. They really exemplify what survival horror is that you don't have too much control over what you're doing, but in that it can be a difficult game. It can be very uninviting to new players. That's why I recommended the Chronicle and the Dark Side Chronicle series more so than the original games, because these can be very intimidating new players. I remember I played Resident Evil 4 when I'm a big Resident Evil nut, but I actually started with 4. After I played 4, I was like, I'll get this game. And it was a huge shock to me how different the games were. I'm recommending this towards the end of your games to get, because you would have had a respect and appreciation for Resident Evil, and you may have wanted to, seeing that you've had played everything that you needed to of Resident Evil, might want to go back and play one of the Resident Evil games and feel what it was like with the original games. And really, this is one of the 2 games that I would recommend. It would be either that or Resident Evil 0, and 0 is my second favorite Resident Evil game. It is so good. But I would recommend Resident Evil, the remake, because it is the original story. You get to feel it, you get to play it, and you get to really experience what this series started off at. The graphics are really good for the time. I mean, this came out in, 2002? Yeah, 2002. And the graphics are gorgeous for the time. It's a gem on the GameCube and something that you definitely should be picking up. So, with that said, this is everything you need to get into Resident Evil game-wise. Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, Resident Evil Dark Side Chronicles, Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil the remake. You get those 5 games right here, you will have everything you need to get into Resident Evil, to enjoy Resident Evil, to understand Resident Evil, and to prepare for Resident Evil 6. So in saying that, if there's any game series that you want me to help you get into, whether it's Mario, whether it's Pokemon, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's anything out there, you let me know. You just ask away, and I will do the best I can. Of course, I've had to play the video game series, but if there's a video game series you want to know how to get into, do not be shy. A couple of people have asked. One of the requests were for the Resident Evil, so here is the Resident Evil how do you get into. But again, don't be shy. Ask. That's what I'm here for. I hope that I help you guys out. So with that said, I'm going to end this video here. This is Andrew saying peace out for now.